We are continuing along in our daily Bible reading. We are in Luke chapter 9. As we have seen in previous chapters, we read a lot about the miracles of Jesus. It certainly would do us well to take some time to consider the miracles, to think about them, to examine them carefully, and to remind ourselves about the power of God. In Luke chapter 9 and verse 12, the Bible says, "Now the day was ending, and the 12 came and said to him, 'Send the crowd away, that they may go into the surrounding villages and countryside and find lodging and get something to eat, for here we are in a desolate place.' But he said to them, 'You give them something to eat.' And they said, 'We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless perhaps we go and buy food for all these people.' For there were about 5,000 men. And he said to his disciples, 'Have them sit down to eat in groups of about 50 each.'" So imagine this scene for a moment. 5,000 individuals, it says 5,000 men, and so that's not necessarily counting the women and children and who else may have also been there. And the Bible says in verse 15, "They did so and had them all sit down. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them and broke them and kept giving them to the disciples to set before the people." Now think about that for a moment. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus gives thanks to God about with respect to this food. And then the disciples go out and they continue to feed these groups of 50 people. Now, how does that work? Well, it's a miracle. That's how it works. But I want you to think about this. This miracle is ongoing. It's continuous in nature. There's 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And there's a group of 50 people, and so 5,000 people, that's a lot of groups. And so this food continually is being multiplied so that everyone can eat. And the Bible says in verse 17, "And they all ate and were satisfied." So not only did they eat, it wasn't just like a little bit, but they ate enough to where they could be satisfied. You guys know how much food you need in order to be satisfied. So think about this miracle again for a second. Not only is it ongoing, but they're getting enough food to be satisfied. And then notice in verse 17, "And the broken pieces which they had left over were picked up 12 baskets full." So now they're going around picking up the rest of the food, and there's more than what they started with. That, my friend, is a miracle. That is amazing. And just thinking about this for a second really should impress us when you think about the power of Jesus and think about his miracles. Again, these things were not done in a corner. 5,000 people got to experience this miracle. They got to taste this miracle. They got to see this miracle. And they would be able to leave and tell others about what just took place. They had this miraculous dinner given to them by Jesus. And so obviously this was pointing to his power. Certainly this is pointing to who he is. And it's an amazing thing to really consider and think about, Jesus feeding 5,000 individuals. So let that sink in. Think about that. Ponder that. Let's certainly give thanks to our great God in heaven. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.